What if the signs of the end have been hiding in plain sight? What if the countdown to Christ's return didn't begin in Jerusalem, but in Africa? For generations, preachers, scholars, and prophets have gazed toward the Middle East, watching for wars, temples, and trumpets. But few have looked southward toward the mountains of Ethiopia, where an ancient faith whispers of a second coming the world is not ready to hear. Because in the highlands of Africa, long before Europe built its cathedrals, long before Rome crowned its popes, a different gospel was being preserved, one unbroken, untranslated, and untouched by empire. And within its pages lies a prophecy so deep, so unsettling, that even modern theologians avoid it. The Ethiopian Bible doesn't just speak of Christ's return as an event of clouds and fire. It speaks of a place, a land sanctified by covenant, purified by suffering, and guarded by a people who never lost the rhythm of heaven. To them, the return of the Messiah isn't something to be watched for, it's something to be prepared for. It is not the invasion of the divine into the world, it is the revelation of the divine within the world. But here's where it gets even more mysterious. While the Western Church builds its timelines and charts its prophecies, Ethiopia has been quietly counting time differently, by a calendar older than Rome, guided by the stars of Enoch and the jubilees of the ancients. And according to that sacred time, the world might already be standing on the threshold of the final revelation. So the question isn't when Christ will return. The question is, from where? What if the throne of God has already shifted? What if Zion isn't waiting to descend, but has already risen from the soil of the African highlands? And what if the words that could unlock this mystery have been sitting for centuries inside a book the West forgot existed, the Ethiopian Bible? Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll see why Ethiopia may hold the final piece of the puzzle. Not as myth, not as legend, but as prophecy carved in stone, written in Guizi, and guarded by men who have devoted their lives to silence. So before we begin, tell me in the comments, do you believe the place of Christ's return could be different from what the world has always taught? Type Zion Awakes if you're ready to see the story the world refused to tell. Now let's begin where time runs backward, where faith never died, and where heaven may be preparing to touch the earth again. In Ethiopia, the hidden prophecy of the highlands. Hidden among the clouds of northern Africa, where the air grows thin and the mountains kiss the horizon, lies a secret older than empire. A land where the gospel was not imported but inherited, where scripture was not translated but born in its own tongue. This is Ethiopia, the mountain kingdom, the land of the covenant. Long before missionaries arrived with their creeds and councils, long before European scholars debated the end of days, the Ethiopian people were already reading from scrolls the rest of the world would not see for another 1,000 years. Scrolls written in Guizi, a language of angels and priests, a script that carried whispers of creation and prophecy across generations. Within those pages lies a mystery that shakes the foundations of traditional theology, a revelation about the return of Christ unlike anything found in the Western canon. To understand it, you must first understand Ethiopia itself, not as a country but as a covenant. According to ancient belief, the hand of God rested on this land long before modern borders were drawn. It was here, the Kabra Nagas declares, that heaven and earth entered into divine agreement, when the Queen of Sheba journeyed to Jerusalem to test the wisdom of Solomon. She did not come for gold or treaties. She came seeking truth, and what she found would change the spiritual geography of the world. Their union, both of mind and blood, produced a son, Menelik I, the child of prophecy, heir to both the throne of David and the destiny of Africa. When Menelik came of age, he traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father. But what he returned with would forever alter the story of God's dwelling on earth. The Ethiopian chronicles tell us that Menelik did not return alone. He brought with him the very Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest described in Exodus, the seat of divine presence itself. Some say he took it by God's command, others that Solomon himself allowed it, understanding that the Spirit had chosen a new resting place. If this is true, then the Ark, the throne of God, left Jerusalem. And if the Ark moved, did God's presence move with it? To the Ethiopian faithful, the answer has always been yes. They believe that when the Ark was carried into the highlands of Aksum, the Spirit of God followed. Zion was no longer a hill in Israel, it became a mountain in Africa. And from that day, Ethiopia was no longer merely a nation. It became a living temple, the continuation of the covenant, the new Zion. The Kabra Nagast calls this the transfer of glory. A divine relocation, silent, deliberate, and enduring. While the rest of the world fought wars over relics, Ethiopia kept the original in hiding, not behind walls of marble but behind vows of lifelong silence. For nearly 3,000 years, that Ark is said to have remained within the chapel of St. Mary of Zion in Aksum, guarded by one chosen monk, a guardian who never leaves the sanctuary until his death. No one else may enter, not king nor priest, not patriarch nor scholar. And yet, the faith of millions rests upon his watch. The Western world calls this legend. Ethiopia calls it truth. But what makes this story truly prophetic is what it implies about the second coming. If the Ark represents the throne of God, his seat among men, and if that throne now rests in Ethiopia, then Christ's return, the reuniting of heaven and earth, may not unfold in the lands we expect. Western prophecy looks east toward Jerusalem. Ethiopian prophecy looks inward, toward the mountains that already hold his presence. Ancient hymns from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church still chant the words, "Zion has moved, and her glory rests upon the land of Cush." In those words lies a theology that the world has largely ignored, that God's dwelling place is not fixed by stone or empire, but by covenant and obedience. Ethiopia's unbroken faith, its refusal to bend to foreign doctrine, its centuries of isolation and devotion, all of it becomes part of a larger spiritual map. While the West modernized and secularized, Ethiopia preserved the rhythm of the divine. Its priests still chant in Guizi, its people still keep the fasts of Moses, and its calendar still follows the cycles of Enoch and Jubilees, the very patterns of sacred time that predate Rome itself. Could it be that the land prepared to receive Christ's return is not the one with the loudest prayers, but the one with the longest memory? From the Book of the Mysteries of Heaven and Earth, a rare Ethiopian text, comes this chilling prophecy. The light of the Lord shall return to the land of the blacks, and the mountains shall shine before the nations. Not as a metaphor, as a promise. To the faithful of Ethiopia, this means that Christ's return will not be a spectacle of clouds for the curious to witness. It will be a revelation that begins where the covenant never broke, in the land where the Ark still rests, where Zion is already alive. And that's what the world has never understood. The return is not about location. It's about alignment. It's about a people whose suffering has refined them, whose worship has outlasted empire, whose covenant has endured untouched. Ethiopia believes that the end does not come to destroy, it comes to restore. Not to erase what was, but to fulfill what began long before Rome, long before the cross, even long before the flood, when heaven chose a mountain, and that mountain was Ethiopia. So before we move further, ask yourself, what if God has already returned, not in thunder but in presence? Not in vision but in covenant? And what if the story of redemption is not reaching its end, but returning to where it first began? If you believe that prophecy is still unfolding, type "the covenant lives" in the comments. Because what the Ethiopian Bible reveals next will challenge everything you thought you knew about the end of days. the covenant that moved. Every covenant in Scripture begins with a movement. From Eden to Canaan, from Sinai to Calvary, God never stayed still. His presence moved, His glory traveled, His covenant found new vessels. But what happens when that covenant leaves the center of the world and takes root in a place the world refuses to look? To Ethiopia, this question is not theory. It is history. According to the Kebra Nagast, the Royal Chronicle of Ethiopia, the covenant that began with Abraham and was sealed through Moses did not end with Israel's kings. It crossed deserts, seas, and generations, until it found sanctuary in the mountains of Africa. It tells of the moment when Menelik I, son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, returned from Jerusalem with the Ark of the Covenant. Not as a thief but as a chosen vessel. Not as rebellion but as fulfillment. The text says that while Solomon slept, the Spirit of God stirred among the priests. The ark, carried by angels, followed Menelik's caravan out of the city. And when Solomon awoke, the light that had once filled the temple was gone. The Shekinah had departed. Not because of sin or exile, but because God had chosen to dwell elsewhere. That is the mystery Ethiopia has guarded for nearly 3,000 years. That God's throne did not vanish, it moved. The ark was not lost. It was relocated by divine will. The Kebra Nagast declares, "The glory of Zion shall not perish. It shall travel to a land chosen of the Lord, where it shall dwell forever." To Ethiopian Christians, those words are not poetry. They are geography. For them, Zion is not a hill of ruins in Jerusalem. Zion is alive in Aksum, where the ark rests beneath a chapel of stone, watched over by a single guardian who will never leave its side. This belief changes everything. If Zion has moved, then the center of God's presence has shifted. The divine current that once flowed from the Temple of Solomon now flows through the highlands of Ethiopia, through its rivers, its fasts, its prayers, and its unbroken faith. And this movement is not just symbolic. Ethiopian theology teaches that when God's covenant moves, it always brings with it a new mission. For Israel, the covenant was to reveal the law. For the church, it was to reveal grace. For Ethiopia, it is to reveal continuity, the bridge between the old and the new, between the law and the cross, between prophecy and fulfillment. That is why Ethiopia's faith has never fit neatly into Western categories. It is not Old Testament or New Testament. It is both, blended, living, seamless. Their priests read from Genesis and Revelation in the same breath. Their prayers echo the Psalms and the Gospels as one song. They see no contradiction between Sabbath and resurrection because to them the covenant never broke. It evolved. When Menelik brought the ark to Ethiopia, he did not steal a relic. He received an inheritance. And the moment that golden chest entered the land of Cush, something shifted in heaven. A new axis of holiness was formed, one that the prophets of Israel never foresaw, and one that theologians of Europe never understood. For centuries, the Western world has called Ethiopia's claim a myth. But the Ethiopian Church does not defend it with argument. It defends it with devotion. Every year, during the Feast of Timkat, priests carry replicas of the Ark, called tablets, through the streets singing hymns of renewal. To the casual observer, it is ritual. To the believer, it is remembrance, a living testimony that God's presence never left. This faith has endured invasion, persecution, famine, and isolation. Empires have risen and fallen, but the procession continues. The chants in Guizi have never ceased. Because to them Zion cannot be conquered, it can only be forgotten. And Ethiopia has refused to forget. Now imagine what this means prophetically. If the ark represents the throne of God, and if that throne now resides in Africa, then the stage of the final revelation is already set. Not in the streets of Jerusalem, but in the highlands where the covenant was preserved. not among those who sought to explain it, but among those who simply kept it. To the Ethiopian mystics, this movement of the ark was not only about relocation, it was about restoration. They believed that in the last days Christ's return will follow the same path the ark once took, from Jerusalem to Ethiopia, from the Temple of Solomon to the mountain of Zion in Aksum. One ancient homily states, "As the glory departed from the sons of Jacob and came to rest among the sons of Sheba, so shall the Son of Man return to the place of his hidden throne." Could it be that the second coming begins not in the clouds above, but from the ground beneath, from the soil that has guarded the covenant in silence for centuries? Perhaps this is why Ethiopia has endured when so many kingdoms have vanished. Because endurance is the proof of covenant. And covenant, in the Ethiopian understanding, is not a contract of ink and law. It is blood, time, and faith woven together until they become indistinguishable. So when the Ethiopian Bible speaks of Christ's return, it does not look to a future event waiting to happen. It speaks of a continuation, the covenant that moved, the glory that relocated, and the prophecy that still lives. And that raises one question the Western world is not ready to answer. If the ark has never left Ethiopia, has God ever left either? If this covenant truly moved, then maybe God's presence has been dwelling where the world least expected, among a people who never needed to prove it, because they never stopped living it. If that truth stirs something in you, write Zion Lives in the comments. Because in the next part, we journey to Aksum itself, to the chapel where one man guards what may be the holiest object on earth, and where the line between history and heaven begins to blur. The guardian of the ark. In the ancient city of Aksum, time moves differently. The air hums with silence, the streets are lined with stone that remembers kings, and in the heart of it all stands a chapel that the world dares not enter. To most it's a modest structure, no gold, no marble, no grandeur. But to Ethiopia, it is the navel of the world, the meeting point between heaven and earth. Here they say rests the Ark of the Covenant, the very throne of God that once dwelt in Solomon's temple. And though the world calls it a myth, Ethiopia calls it proof. Because there, in that chapel, lives a man, one man, who has devoted his entire existence to guarding what no eye but his may see. They call him the guardian of the ark. He is not a priest among many. He is the chosen one, selected through ancient ceremony, anointed with holy oil and sealed away from the world. Once appointed, he will never leave the chapel grounds again. He sleeps there. He prays there. He dies there. He does not speak to outsiders. He is not allowed to see family, to take rest, or to walk beyond the walls that protect the sacred. His life is a living offering, a human vow woven around divine mystery. And yet, in that solitude, his silence becomes the loudest testimony of all. While the world debates if the ark ever existed, one man has built his entire existence around it. Western archaeologists have come, trying to prove or disprove the legend. Some have claimed to glimpse the ark through the curtains. Others confessed they never saw anything at all. But that is the point. Ethiopia never sought validation from the world. Its faith does not depend on sight. It depends on reverence. For Ethiopians, the holiness of the ark is not measured by its visibility, but by its inaccessibility. To see it would not make one closer to God, it would risk death. Because the ark is not an artifact. It is presence itself. The scriptures say in Exodus 25 that the ark was made of acacia wood, covered in pure gold and overshadowed by 2 cherubim. It carried within it the stone tablets of the law, the rod of Aaron, and a pot of manna, symbols of covenant, authority, and provision. But to Ethiopia, the ark carries something more, the continuation of the divine relationship between heaven and earth. Every year, during the festival of Timkat, the entire nation remembers that relationship. Across cities and villages, priests bring out tablets, sacred replicas of the ark, wrapped in silk and carried on their heads under embroidered umbrellas. The processions move through the streets as drums beat, prayers rise, and chants in ancient Gwizi echo through the air. It's not a parade. It's a reenactment of Exodus, a living memory that the presence of God still walks among them. They do not say, "The ark was." They say, "The ark is." This difference is what separates Ethiopia's faith from the rest of the world. Others look for relics. Ethiopia protects relationship. Others search for proof. Ethiopia guards mystery. Because in the Ethiopian mind, the ark is not a box of gold. It is the throne of God's covenantal presence, the very space where mercy meets law, where heaven meets earth. To approach it requires more than curiosity. It requires consecration. The guardian of the ark embodies that truth. He is not a relic keeper. He is a living sacrifice. Each day, he offers prayer and incense before the unseen presence, believing that as long as he breathes, the covenant endures. And when he dies, another will take his place, not chosen by ambition, but by divine casting of lots, just as the apostles once replaced Judas. No president, patriarch, or pope has ever entered that chapel. Even Ethiopia's own emperors, believed to descend from Solomon himself, stood outside its doors. When Emperor Haile Selassie I visited Aksum, he bowed his head before the sanctuary but did not enter. He said, "No man enters where God himself abides." And that's the reverence the world has forgotten. In an age of cameras and proofs, Ethiopia still believes in mystery. A mystery that does not beg to be understood, only to be honored. Now think of what that means for prophecy. If the Ark of the Covenant, the throne of God, has truly rested in Ethiopia for millennia, then divine presence never departed from the earth. It did not ascend beyond reach. It relocated to remain among the faithful. This would mean that the spiritual gravity of the world has already shifted. That the next great revelation of God will not descend upon the stones of a rebuilt temple, but will rise from a land that never stopped being holy. A land that did not trade faith for modernity or mystery for evidence. Perhaps this is why Ethiopia's faith has survived every storm, because it is built not on what it sees but on what it safeguards. And maybe, just maybe, this quiet chapel in Aksum is the reason heaven has not fallen silent. Because where men have forgotten covenant, one man still remembers. So let me ask you this. If one life can protect the presence of God for an entire nation, what could an entire generation protect if it returned to reverence? Type, the ark still lives. If you believe there are still places in the world where holiness is not history, it's home. Because in the next part, we step beyond the walls of Aksum and into the mystery of time itself. A calendar unlike any other, one that might hold the hidden countdown to Christ's return. The calendar of heaven. Time, the one thing all humanity shares, yet none fully understands. Every empire has measured it, every religion has tried to master it, but only a few have ever truly aligned with it. The Western world measures time by convenience, seconds, hours, days, months, years. But Ethiopia measures time by revelation. To them, time is not a human invention. It is a divine covenant. The Ethiopian calendar stands as one of the oldest still in use. A calendar older than the Gregorian, purer than the Julian, and unbroken since the days of the early church. While the modern world says we are in the year 2025, Ethiopia calls this year 2018. To most, that's just a quirk of math, a 7-year difference. But to those who study the Ethiopian scriptures, it's a sign. They call it the delay of grace, the hidden years between man's reckoning and God's timing. It's as if heaven moves on a slower, holier rhythm, not rushed by the clocks of kings or the calendars of conquest. And here lies a mystery that few have ever considered. What if the countdown to the return of Christ has been measured on the wrong clock? The Ethiopian calendar is not arbitrary. It's built upon ancient wisdom, from the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, both preserved within the Ethiopian Bible but lost to the Western canon. In those books, time is sacred. It is alive. It breathes in patterns of 7, 12, and 50. Every week mirrors creation. Every month mirrors divine order. Every 50 years, the Jubilee mirrors redemption itself. According to Enoch, the heavens are not just stars, they are keepers of time. He describes the movements of the sun and moon as divine messengers, faithfully marking the seasons appointed by God. And the angels of time, the watchers of the light, were assigned to guard the balance of days and nights, ensuring that humanity would never forget the rhythm of heaven. But when sin entered the world, time itself was corrupted. Calendars were rewritten, seasons were shifted, and the divine alignment was lost. Humanity began to count by its own convenience, not by God's precision. Yet Ethiopia never changed. Their timekeeping remained rooted in the Enochian pattern, 12 months of 30 days each, with 5 sacred days at the year's end, and a 6th day added every leap year to honor the completion of creation. Even the naming of their months echoes the language of Genesis, time not as arithmetic but as worship. To the Ethiopian church, this isn't just heritage, it's prophecy. Because in their belief, when the world's calendars fall out of sync with heaven, confusion reigns, nations rise against nations, faith grows cold, and truth becomes relative. But when the sacred calendar realigns, heaven and earth draw close again. Now think about this. If the world is 7 years ahead of God's clock, then perhaps what we call delay is actually mercy. Perhaps what we call waiting is God giving humanity the last window of grace before the return. The Ethiopian priests call this period the 7th year of silence. It is said to be a divine buffer, time extended not because God is slow, but because he is patient. As the Apostle Peter wrote, 1,000 years are as one day to the Lord, and one day as 1,000 years. But Ethiopia's sacred texts add, and the appointed time shall come when heaven's count and man's count shall meet, and there shall be no more delay. That convergence, the moment when the heavenly calendar and the human calendar finally align, is what Ethiopian prophecy describes as the day of return. Not the day the world expects, but the day heaven has been preparing. When will that be? No one can know the exact day or hour, but Ethiopia's timing has always seemed to move just behind the world, as though echoing the footsteps of prophecy. When the world said Christ was crucified in 1 year, Ethiopia's count placed it in another. When the world celebrates a new millennium, Ethiopia enters it later, almost as if to say, the true dawn has not yet come. Perhaps that's why, even now, Ethiopia seems to walk a half step behind global time, because it's not following the world's clock. It's following heaven's. And in the writings of the Book of Jubilees, a remarkable line appears, a warning given to Moses on Mount Sinai. For the generations will forget the order of the years, they will neglect the appointed seasons, and they will err in the count of weeks and months, and they will disturb all time. To Ethiopia, this prophecy has already come true. Humanity has disturbed time. We have built our own system and called it progress, while the sacred pattern has been nearly erased. But those who still walk by the ancient rhythm, who still fast by the old days, who still mark the feasts as their fathers did, are, according to their faith, walking in alignment with heaven itself. So what if the Ethiopian calendar isn't behind? What if it's ahead, not in count but in truth? What if when the world says, not yet, heaven is already preparing? Maybe that's why Christ's return will shock so many. Because when it happens, it won't match the timelines of men. It will fulfill the timing of God. And Ethiopia, quietly and faithfully, may already be living on that very schedule. The calendar of heaven isn't a clock. It's a covenant of rhythm, and those who keep it are not waiting for prophecy. They are living inside it. So ask yourself, if the world has been watching the wrong timeline, will it even recognize when prophecy is fulfilled? If that question stirs your spirit, type heaven's time in the comments. Because in the next part, we will uncover the suffering that refined a nation, and why Ethiopia's centuries of pain may have been the very fire God used to prepare his chosen vessel for the revelation to come. The refining of a nation. Every chosen vessel must pass through fire. Gold is not gold until it is refined. Faith is not faith until it has suffered. And in the story of nations, none has endured the fire like Ethiopia. From the beginning, Ethiopia's journey has been a paradox. A land of kings and exiles, of glory and ashes, of ancient wisdom hidden beneath the scars of time. Empires have risen and vanished like waves, yet Ethiopia has never been fully conquered. Not by Babylon, not by Rome, not by the armies of Islam, not even by the empires of Europe. It has been invaded, wounded, and scarred, but never broken. To the Ethiopian believer, this endurance is not chance. It is covenant. Because in their theology, the mark of God's favor is not found in comfort, but in endurance. To be chosen is to be refined. To be refined is to be ready. The scriptures say in Psalm 66 verse 10, "For you, O God, have tested us. You have refined us as silver is refined." And Ethiopia has lived that verse, not once but throughout centuries. When famine struck, they called it a fast of the land, a time when creation itself joined in their worship. When colonizers came with chains and flags, they saw them not as gods but as tests. When kingdoms fell into darkness, Ethiopia's monks kept the lamps of faith burning in caves, mountains and monasteries, their chants echoing through stone corridors as empires turned to dust. Even in the 20th century, when Mussolini's armies invaded, Ethiopia stood as the only African nation that refused to bow. For 5 bitter years the land burned, but faith did not die. Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judah, went into exile but returned victorious, a living symbol of resurrection itself. And when the world saw Ethiopia's suffering, they saw weakness. But heaven saw refinement. Ethiopian elders often say, "The fire does not destroy the gold. It exposes it." And perhaps that is the secret behind Ethiopia's unbroken faith. It was never built on prosperity but on perseverance. When the Western world debated theology and comfort, Ethiopia wept in fasting and prayer. When others built monuments of stone, Ethiopia carved its churches out of living rock, temples born not from wealth but from devotion. When other nations forgot God in the noise of progress, Ethiopia whispered his name through tears and hunger. Every famine became a fast. Every war became a prayer. Every exile became a pilgrimage. And through it all the covenant endured. Many have wondered how a nation so ancient could survive the centuries without collapse. The answer in Ethiopian belief is simple, because suffering was never wasted. Each hardship became a layer of sanctification. Each loss, a reminder that God was still present. In the book of the mysteries of heaven and earth, an Ethiopian text found nowhere else in the world, it is written, "The Lord chose a people who would endure, that his light may never be extinguished from the earth. He placed his fire among them, and though they were scorched, they were not consumed." That is Ethiopia's story, the burning bush that still burns. When the rest of the world looks for the signs of Christ's return, Ethiopia looks inward, to the signs of purification. Because they believe that the coming of the Lord is not a spectacle of the sky, but a reflection of the soul. Only the purified can see him clearly. Only the refined can carry his presence. And so, every trial becomes preparation. Every wound becomes a witness. In Western prophecy, suffering is often seen as judgment. In Ethiopian prophecy, suffering is invitation, a calling to deeper communion with God. They believe the Lord allows fire to test those he loves most, because only those who have endured can stand in the final revelation. Just as gold cannot return to the furnace once it is pure, Ethiopia believes its centuries of fire were not punishment but prophecy, preparing it to host the return of the King. In their songs and hymns they still sing, "Blessed is the land that has been wounded, for it shall shine with healing." That is the rhythm of their faith, not despair but destiny. Even today, as Ethiopia faces droughts, conflicts, and trials, the faithful see beyond the pain. They say, if we are being tested, it means the covenant is still alive. They believe that every hardship draws them closer to the fulfillment of ancient prophecy, when the glory that once moved from Israel to Ethiopia will shine again before all nations. And perhaps this is what the prophet Isaiah meant when he declared, "Princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God." Psalm 68 verse 31. Those hands, scarred, weary but unbroken, are still raised, still stretching, still waiting. Because Ethiopia understands something the world has forgotten. God's promises are not proven by prosperity. They are proven by perseverance. And when the time of revelation comes, it will not begin among those who never suffered. It will begin among those who have already been refined. So ask yourself, has the fire in your life been punishment or preparation? If that question stirs your heart, type "refined by fire" in the comments. Because in the next part, we journey from fire to stone, to the sacred city where heaven touches the earth through walls not built by man's hands, but carved by faith itself. The living temple of rock. There are places on earth where faith is heard. And there are places where faith is carved. Deep in the mountains of northern Ethiopia lies one of the greatest mysteries of devotion ever created by human hands. Or perhaps by divine inspiration. The city is called Lalibela, and its churches were not built upon the earth, they were carved from it. From solid volcanic rock, 11 cathedrals rise downward, not upward. Each one hollowed from a single mass of stone, carved floor to ceiling, wall to altar, roof to cross. No scaffolding, no mortar, no blueprints. Only prayer, vision, and chisels guided by light. They call it the New Jerusalem. A city not made by kings but by monks, not for glory but for pilgrimage. It was created, they say, after the fall of the Holy Land to foreign powers, when God revealed to King Lalibela in a dream, "If my people cannot go to Jerusalem, I shall bring Jerusalem to them." And so he did. Each church was designed as a reflection of the heavenly pattern, a mirror of what was seen in vision. The river Jordan runs between them. The Church of Golgotha holds the echoes of Calvary. The Church of St. Mary resembles the womb of the covenant, a reminder that the Word became flesh. And at the center stands Bet Georgius, the Church of St. George, shaped in the form of a cross, visible only from above, as if it was meant to be seen by heaven first. The people of Ethiopia call Lalibela a living Bible in stone. Every arch, every tunnel, every carved cross tells a story of redemption. But there is one truth that binds them all. These temples were not built for God to come down, they were built for man to rise up. Unlike the grand cathedrals of Europe, towering toward the clouds, Lalibela's sanctuaries descend into the earth, downward, into humility, into surrender, into the heart of creation itself. Because to Ethiopia, holiness is not found in height, it is found in depth. The deeper you go, the closer you come to the foundation of God's dwelling. They believe that the divine does not demand towers of pride, but caverns of devotion. Imagine walking down those narrow stone corridors, barefoot, surrounded by echoes of prayer, candles flickering against ancient walls that still breathe incense from centuries past. There is no grandeur there, only gravity. A weight of silence that presses upon the soul until you realize you are standing in a place that remembers heaven. No architects can explain how such structures were made in the 12th century with no modern tools. The legend says that when men grew weary from carving, angels descended by night to finish the work before dawn. By day the monks carved. By night, heaven completed what earth had begun. And so, Lalibela became a meeting ground, where time and eternity shook hands. Where faith and stone became one substance. Where the unseen realm touched the visible world. The message hidden in its stones is this: God does not always ask us to build upward. Sometimes He asks us to dig deeper. To carve faith not in monuments but in our own hearts. To hollow out the noise, the pride, the doubt, until what remains is pure devotion, living temple, breathing stone. In the Ethiopian Bible, the Book of the Covenant says, "The house of the Lord is not raised by hands, but revealed through obedience." That is Lalibela's secret. It was revealed, not constructed. Every church was already there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be freed by faith. And perhaps that is a prophecy of what God is doing with humanity itself. We are not being built, we are being revealed. The image of God was always within us, waiting to be carved out through struggle, through surrender, through suffering. Ethiopia's rock churches are not merely places of worship. They are parables in stone. They show that God's presence is not confined to temples made with hands, but lives wherever hearts have been carved open by devotion. Each hammer strike, each prayer, each song was a reminder. Heaven is not distant. Heaven is hidden beneath the surface of earth, and of us. To this day, pilgrims walk for miles to touch those walls, to pray in the cool darkness of rock, to hear the echo of their own voice become one with ancient chants. They don't go there to ask for blessings. They go there to remember that they are the blessing. The world looks to the sky for signs of Christ's return. But perhaps the real sign is below, in the stones that have never stopped worshiping. Because Ethiopia teaches that the return of Christ is not about heaven descending, it is about earth remembering. And when that remembrance awakens fully, every stone, every mountain, every heart carved by suffering and faith will cry out with one voice, "Zion is alive." So as you think of these living temples, ask yourself, what has God been carving in you? Has He been building upward, or digging deeper? If you believe that God reveals His glory through depth, type living temple in the comments. Because in the next part, we will journey from the stones of faith to the throne of prophecy, where kings, lions, and destiny intertwine in the story of a bloodline that may hold the key to the second coming itself. The bloodline and the lion. Every covenant leaves a bloodline. Every promise leaves a witness. And in the story of God's dealings with humanity, the most enduring sign of His covenant has always been the line that carries His name. The house of David, the root of Jesse, the bloodline of kings. But what if that line did not end in Jerusalem? What if it continued, unbroken, through the mountains of Africa? The Ethiopian Bible and the Kebre Nagast declare something astonishing. That when the Queen of Sheba bore a son to King Solomon, a child named Menelik I, the royal blood of Israel flowed into Africa. And from that moment, Ethiopia became the second Israel, the living continuation of the Davidic covenant. For over 3,000 years, Ethiopian kings traced their lineage back to Solomon, calling themselves the seed of David and the heirs of Zion. They believed, and still believe, that the divine throne on earth rests not only upon heritage but upon holiness. This belief reached its highest expression in the 20th century, in the person of Haile Selassie I, the 225th emperor of the Solomonic line. Crowned in 1930, he was anointed with oil from the Ark's guardians, robed in gold and scarlet, and given titles that stunned the watching world. King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah. The same titles the book of Revelation gives to Christ himself. To some, this was symbolic. To Ethiopia, it was prophetic. Haile Selassie did not claim to be the Messiah, but his coronation fulfilled ancient prophecy that a king from the line of David would once again rise in the last days, in the land of Zion, to prepare the world for the return of the true king. When he spoke not as a ruler but as a witness. When he walked as one who bore the weight of an ancient covenant on his shoulders. And when the world bowed to him, he pointed upward and said, "Glory be to God alone." Yet outside Ethiopia, his rise awakened something unexpected. Across the ocean, in the Caribbean and the Americas, enslaved descendants of Africa heard of this black emperor crowned as the conquering Lion of Judah, and their spirits trembled. They saw in him a fulfillment of Isaiah's words, "Princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God." From that awakening was born a spiritual movement, the Rastafarian faith, named after Haile Selassie's pre-coronation title, Rastafari Makoan. To them, he was not merely a man, but the visible sign that God had not forgotten Africa, that Zion was not lost. But here lies the mystery that few truly understand. The Ethiopian church never worshipped Haile Selassie as God. They revered him as the keeper of prophecy. A vessel chosen to remind the world that God's covenant with David never died. In his speeches, Haile Selassie often spoke of justice, unity, and divine order. But beneath his words ran a deeper current, one that mirrored the apocalyptic tone of the book of Enoch and the Gospel of Matthew. He warned that the time would come when mankind's pride and violence would draw judgment upon the earth, and that only through humility, unity, and the return to God's law could the nations find peace again. Many dismissed his warnings as politics, but to those who listened with spiritual ears, they heard prophecy. For Ethiopia, Haile Selassie represented the bridge between what was and what is to come, the last echo of the Solomonic throne before the return of the true Lion of Judah, Christ himself. And if you listen closely to Ethiopia's liturgy, you'll hear it even now. Hymns that blend reverence for the ancient kings with expectation for the heavenly one. They sing, "The lion shall roar from Zion, and the earth shall tremble. The Son shall return to the throne of his Father, and the covenant shall be fulfilled." To them, Haile Selassie was not the end of prophecy. He was the sign that the final chapter was approaching. Even his name carries mystery. Haile Selassie means power of the Trinity. And in Ethiopian theology, the Trinity represents the fullness of divine revelation, creation, redemption, and return. So when the power of the Trinity took the throne, many believed heaven was signaling the closing of the age. The emperor himself spoke these words in his final years. "We have not labored to build an empire, but to preserve a covenant. The kingdom of men is dust, only the kingdom of God shall endure." And then silence. Haile Selassie was deposed, the monarchy ended, and Ethiopia entered years of darkness. But in that silence, the faithful heard something else, a pause before fulfillment. They believed the lion had not fallen. He had retreated into the spirit, into the prophecy that will roar again when Christ himself returns to Zion. That is why in Ethiopia they say, "The throne is empty but not abandoned. The line of Solomon still lives, but the crown now waits for the true king, the one who bears not gold but glory." So what if Ethiopia's kings were never meant to rule forever, but to prepare the way for the return of the lion who reigns forever? What if the coronation of Haile Selassie was not history, but a rehearsal? Because when Christ returns, he will not come to reclaim a lost throne. He will come to sit upon one that has been kept waiting for him. If you believe the covenant still breathes, type the lion lives in the comments. Because in the next part, we will uncover the most mysterious teaching of all. The Ethiopian understanding that the return of Christ is not an event to come, but a revelation already rising from within. The return from within. Every prophecy has two sides, the event and the awakening. One happens in time. The other happens in the heart. And according to the Ethiopian Bible, the greatest revelation of the end times is not that Christ will come to the world, but that he will rise within it. For centuries, humanity has looked upward, searching the clouds, scanning the sky, waiting for a flash of light and a trumpet's cry. But the sacred texts of Ethiopia whisper something different. They say the kingdom of heaven will not come by observation. It will come by manifestation. Because God does not only descend, he reveals. And revelation begins from the inside. In the Book of the Covenant, an ancient Ethiopian text, it is written, "The Lord shall awaken his image in those who have kept his word, and his glory shall be seen in them before it is seen upon the earth." To them, the second coming is not only a return of Christ to the world, it is a return of Christ through his people. It is the moment when the divine presence, long hidden within covenant hearts, begins to shine outward again. Western prophecy speaks of clouds parting. Ethiopian prophecy speaks of hearts opening. It is the renewal of the covenant from within. The same spirit that once rested upon the ark now resting upon the faithful. Because the ark was never about gold and wood. It was about presence. And presence can move. Presence can multiply. Presence can dwell in people. When the Apostle Paul wrote, "Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that his Spirit dwells in you?" Ethiopia had already been living that truth for centuries. Every fast, every chant, every act of devotion was not ritual, it was readiness. A preparation for the awakening of the divine within. The Book of Enoch says, "In those days the righteous shall shine brighter than the sun, and the light of the Holy One shall dwell in them." That is the return Ethiopia has been waiting for, not merely a day on the calendar, but a transformation in creation. A moment when the sons and daughters of God remember who they are, and the Spirit of Christ rises within them like the dawn. They believe that before the trumpet sounds in the sky, it will sound in the soul. Before the clouds part in heaven, they will part in the human heart. Because heaven is not far away. It is waiting to be revealed through the faithful. In the mysteries of heaven and earth, it is said, "The light shall return to the land of the blacks, and from them shall it go forth to the nations as in the first day." This is the fulfillment of prophecy, that the same light which moved from Israel to Ethiopia will now move from Ethiopia to the world. Not as empire, but as enlightenment. Not as domination, but as revelation. The return is not a foreign arrival, it is a global awakening. The body of Christ rising as one, the Spirit of God inhabiting his people once more. Every prayer, every fast, every tear of faith has been preparing for this, for heaven to dwell within us again. When you understand that, you stop waiting for signs and start becoming one. Because the final revelation is not just about what comes down, but what comes alive. Ethiopian prophecy teaches that when Christ returns, the faithful will not recognize him by his face, but by his presence. And those who have kept the covenant will say not, "Behold, he comes," but "Behold, he is here." So maybe the question has never been, when will he return? Maybe the question has always been, are we ready to reveal him? The mountains of Ethiopia have already begun to echo this truth. The chants of monks rise like ancient smoke. The prayers of generations form a river that flows through time itself, calling all creation back to remembrance. Because the true second coming is not delayed. It is awakening, one heart at a time. And when that awakening reaches its fullness, every nation will see it. Not as lightning from east to west, but as light from within. spreading from the land that kept the covenant to a world that lost it. That is the mystery of Zion. It was never lost. It was hidden in the faithful, waiting to be revealed again. So if you are hearing these words and something within you stirs, that is not coincidence. That is awakening. That is the covenant calling you home. Type Christ within in the comments if you believe the return begins in the heart before it fills the heavens. Because as the Ethiopian Bible declares, the end of the age is not the end of life, but the beginning of divine remembrance. And perhaps when the final trumpet sounds, it will not be a sound from the sky, but an echo from within. The sound of God remembering Himself in us. The revelation and the call. What if the return of Christ has never been about distance, but recognition? What if the kingdom of heaven was never meant to arrive, because it was never gone? Ethiopia has whispered this truth for centuries, that the presence of God is not lost in time, only forgotten in the hearts of men. That Zion did not vanish, it moved. And those who never stopped keeping the covenant have kept the fire alive for all of us. From the ark resting in Aksum, to the monks chanting in stone churches, to the calendar still keeping heaven's rhythm. Ethiopia has stood as a living testimony that faith does not need to be modern to be eternal. While the world raced ahead, Ethiopia remembered. And in remembering, it preserved something the world will one day need again, the original rhythm of heaven. The Ethiopian Bible tells us that every age ends not with destruction, but with revelation. And revelation is not what God hides from man, it is what God awakens within man. Perhaps that's what the second coming truly is, not the return of a stranger but the unveiling of the familiar, the recognition of Christ in every place His love was never forgotten. When you look at Ethiopia, you're not just looking at a country. You're looking at a covenant. You're looking at a nation that has already lived what others still await: exile, suffering, refinement, and endurance. And through it all, it never let go of the divine thread that ties heaven to earth. Maybe that's why prophecy points there. Because God hides His greatest treasures where the proud will never look. In silence, in suffering, in faith that does not need to be seen to believe. And now the question echoes through time. Has the world been watching the wrong horizon? Has Zion already awakened while the nations slept? Perhaps the sound we're waiting for, the trumpet, the thunder, the voice of the returning King, isn't coming from the sky but from within. A whisper becoming a roar. A memory becoming revelation. The story of Ethiopia reminds us that heaven never abandoned earth. It simply waited for earth to remember heaven. So if your heart has felt that pull, that ancient remembering, then you have already heard the call. You are part of the return. Because Christ's coming is not only an event to witness, it is a reality to embody. Every act of love, every moment of truth, every heart that still believes, is a piece of that kingdom rising again. And maybe when the final day arrives, the world will not see a sky split by lightning, but a humanity filled with light. And the voice from heaven will not say, "It is finished." It will say, "It is fulfilled." If this message awakens something in you, type Zion Lives in the comments. Share this story with someone who still believes prophecy is alive. And subscribe, because the next revelation will take us deeper into the hidden prophecies of the Book of Enoch and the secrets the watchers left behind. Until then, remember this: the kingdom is not coming. The kingdom is becoming. And the ones who remember are the ones who reveal it. If this message touched your heart, don't let it end here. Someone you know, a friend, a family member, maybe even someone who's quietly searching for answers, needs to hear this truth too. Share this video with them. You might be the reason they rediscover faith, or awaken to something they've been missing all their life. And if you're new here, welcome to the journey. This channel isn't just about stories, it's about revelation. Every week, we explore the hidden depths of Scripture, the ancient Ethiopian texts, and the mysteries of the Bible that the world has forgotten. So make sure you like this video, not just for numbers but to help this message reach more souls who are hungry for understanding. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next revelation when it drops. After this, take a moment to explore the channel. There are teachings here on the Book of Enoch, the Ark of the Covenant, the mysteries of time, and the prophecies that still speak today. Every story here carries a piece of divine truth waiting to be rediscovered. Remember, revelation is a journey, not a destination. So walk with us. Keep seeking, keep learning, and keep your spirit open. Until next time, stay blessed, stay curious, and may the light of Zion continue to guide your path.